Hi everyone, Vactini Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Royce da 5'9" record, The Allegory. This is the newest full-length LP from one of Detroit's most skilled rappers, Royce da 5'9". And there was a time when Royce wasn't seen as much more than that guy that had a really good feature on Eminem's Slim Shady LP. But Royce's longevity through the 2000s, combined with his output over this past decade, has made him one of the most respected vets today, with quality verses when he was 1/4 of Slaughterhouse, those beloved collabs he did with DJ Premier, along with super hefty projects like Layers and Book of Ryan. Royce's 8th album over here might be his most ambitious undertaking yet, with a great feature list with everyone from Vince Staples to the Griselda Boys to T.I. Royce also handles a lot of the production on this record too. While he's no DJ Premier, the instrumentals on this thing aren't that bad. I would actually say they're one of the record's selling points. Royce has a pretty good ear for beats, and I like that a majority of them have interestingly weird characteristics, like the fat lo-fi mix on the track I Don't Age with all of these heavenly harp runs, or that kooky rigid quarter note bass line on Dope Man, boop 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 boop. Then there's the beat on Pendulum, which is super stark, stripped back to the point where it's almost awkward. That warped, detuned lead melody throughout the track is so strange. Meanwhile, I Play Forever's instrumental features this huge chunk of sound, super dramatic, from what sounds like an old black and white movie soundtrack. It's super villainous in the same way that an MF Doom track might be. So in a way, I'm not surprised that Royce had a hand in the beats on this thing, because as a producer, he doesn't have an established sound, so as a result, the production on here isn't really boxed into a certain style. But despite this project being titled The Allegory, and having a very huge, gigantic, and almost cinematic setup in the first couple of tracks, along with there being a skit where the definition of allegory is pretty much said verbatim, this album is not much of an allegory. There's no super coherent or linear storyline to follow from track to track to track, and whatever meaning or moral message Royce is packing into this record, it doesn't leave much up to the imagination, as his intent and his political points of view are made very clear, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, especially since I see eye to eye with him on a lot of the stuff he's saying in terms of systematic racism, financial literacy and dependence, the drug war, exploitation in the music industry, as well as greed and opportunism in drug dealing. But still, the record just feels like more of a scattered array of tracks working off a loose set of themes. Again, not so much a focused allegory, which in theory would be fine if most of the verses and tracks here were great, which they pretty much are. I think Royce is truly in rare form on this project, whether he's focusing on writing from the standpoint of a character on the track Dope Man, or just rattling off all of these funny or witty one-liners. They say you are what you eat, but I never ate goat! Or that one line when he says he's cold enough to go on a date with the 8th of December and then make the winter pay for the rest of the dinner. But also, take note of Royce's poetry and line of thought on the Grace intro to the record, or the second half of Overcomer. Easily, these are two of the most refined moments in Royce's discography as of late, especially with bars like checks and balances by the curb, steps to amateurs, flying birds, connected annual to buying a surge, expecting the amateurs to try and merge. I find it strange the last few bars are basically this admittance of Royce being kind of closed-minded when it comes to sexual orientation, but then reminding the audience, actually, I'm shallow here, which in a way he confirms later on the record on the track Upside Down, whose opening bars, personally, I interpreted as being quite homophobic. So I guess as long as Royce isn't saying anything that's overtly cringy or discriminatory, the lyricism is pretty much there. What's most important, though, is do all of these separate elements come together into good songs? I think they do a majority of the time, like the chilling banger Thou Shalt or Black Savage, which is a Kanye-sized multi-featured epic with one great verse after another and all of these calming chants laced into the instrumental too. Personally, I think the end of the LP does drag on a little bit, and the topics Royce approaches at this point only serves as a reminder that the allegory of this record isn't really being built up or added to all that much. I think the only track I overtly disliked was Tricked with King Crooked. Annoying, booming beat on this one and a super tedious flow. Tricked, we've been tricked, it's a trick, you're a trick, I'm a trick, I've been tricked, she's been tricked, he's been tricked. The concept of the song itself is not bad, but this really needed to go back to the drawing board. Look, the only other major issue I had with this record, and I do have to talk about this, and I might have to talk about it for a little bit, is the messaging and the skits. Like Eminem's appearance on the record, where I think he has his heart in the right place on this one, as I guess he is trying to give legitimacy to the idea that one might grow up with a chip on his or her shoulder, being black and feeling unrepresented and disrespected in a different culture, in a white culture. Also exploring this idea of rock music essentially being usurped in a way by Elvis being the king of rock and roll. However, Eminem doesn't seem to turn the clock forward and acknowledge that his impact on hip-hop was not Elvis level in terms of dictating the tone of the genre entirely, but still, I mean, you know, there's still, you know, an impact to be measured and discussed in an Elvis type of way, I think. But Eminem actively avoids engaging in that really obvious part of the conversation. And then there are the multiple mentions and jabs throughout the record against modern medicine and science, specifically vaccinations. Royce going as far as to blatantly say that his son got autism from vaccinations, which not only has there been a ton of research on from the vaccination side, but look, there are very well-funded foundations out there that do research on autism every day. And while there have been found to be environmental factors that impact this genetic disorder, vaccinations have not been shown to be one of them. But even without autism as a reason, Royce seems to be generally against the idea of inoculations. Listen to the Black People in America sketch and you will hear it right there at the kickoff. And look, I'll say much of what I said in my Freddie Gibbs review, my bandana review, when this very same topic came up. While this is not acceptable, in a way, it is understandable, because historically, what you must understand is that our healthcare system for generations has massively failed and mistreated Black Americans, from lack of care, inadequate care, statistically doctors treating Black patients differently than they do white patients, also higher rates of death for things that are easily treatable or prevented, and if you want to get really dark, look up the Tuskegee experiment. So combine all of these things and have them carry out over generations, and of course, you're going to have distrust of the system. And then pile onto it the heartbreak and the shock of finding out that your kid has this disorder that there's so little understanding of. So while I feel for this man's pain, and, you know, I wish it could all go away, this is not something I want people internalizing, especially with something like coronavirus on the rise. If we find ourselves in a place where there's a vaccine available, should anyone be listening to this album's advice to avoid a coronavirus vaccine? No, of course not. Assuming that it's properly tested and it's vetted and the FDA approves it, yes, of course. Obviously, I want all vaccines to be approved and safe. But having said all of that, no, vaccine should not be avoided. So look, at the end of the day, I think this record features a pretty solid list of tracks, questionable ideas here and there, good instrumentals, and in Allegory, a concept that is pretty weakly executed, if you ask me. Maybe these issues will improve the next time around. At least I hope so. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 6 on this one. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And yeah, over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. And I hope all of you are doing well and had a fun time watching this one. Anthony Fantano, Royce to 5'9", forever.